Hello and welcome to Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. Saturday was billed as Super Saturday in the Six Nations and it well and truly lived up to the hype. Wales' unlikely march to a Grand Slam looked all but confirmed after a sensational performance, at least for 68 minutes, away to France, but two late tries from the French, including one from fullback Bryce Dulin, with the final play of the game meant Wayne Pilak's side left Paris empty-handed. We'll be reflecting on that game and Wales' incredible turnaround this year with the former Ospreys head coach Sean Holley. Elsewhere on Saturday, England. It says uninspiring here. I don't think that's quite the word I would use. It'd be a lot shorter. Six Nations campaign ended in a humbling defeat in Ireland against an Ireland side who produced possibly their finest display so far under head coach Andy Farrell. Ireland skipper Johnny Sexton said afterwards the win was proof his side are making progress under the new coaching setup. Whilst for England, the result leaves many questions for the head coach Eddie Jones, who admitted afterwards that the squad is in the process of being altered. Not that we've seen any sign of that, but we'll assess the disappointing campaign throughout the show. Anyway, away from the Six Nations, there has been a major development in the women's game after World Rugby announced a new major tournament, which they are saying will supercharge the women's side of the sport. The tournament will see 16 teams competing annually in a three-tiered competition. The announcement has been met with widespread approval and we'll be getting the thoughts of former England captain Katy Daly-McLean about it and also about the up-and-coming Six Nations, which is set to get underway next month. And as ever, we'll be answering your questions, including, obviously, the latest on the Lions Tour and the future of the Six Nations following investment from CVC Capital. Alongside me today, once again, to discuss all this is the former England Sevens captain, Rob Vickerman. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Brian, you good?
Yeah, not bad. Look, let's start in Paris. I had the... No, it was because it was a moment in time, the pleasure of being there in the 100-minute game against France and Wales. And I thought, we'll never see a game of equal drama. But in different ways, this certainly was. I mean, just give us your overall impression first.
Well, first of all, I have to say how much I enjoyed your comment about the French director. Having done a few French OBs before, the kind of random angles of seeing scrums from angles you'd never really seen and the acute positions of the corner flag and things like that, just remarkable. But I must admit, I was sat watching it with my wife who had to persuade to dodge the voice. And it was just a remarkable game. Ebbed and flowed. The drama was there. There's a controversy aplenty. And I just think it personally really sum up just how special the Six Nations are.
Yes.
It was remarkable.
I mean, that was what, it was your comment there and so many comments like that after the game that sort of dictated the article I wrote for Telegraph on the aligning the importance of the Six Nations into the psyche of rugby people, certainly in this hemisphere. I mean, the Welsh, I said it was cruel. The sport is cruel, but it wasn't unlucky. 12 minutes to go, 10 points up, with a man up, they should see that game out. You've got to give a lot of credit to the French for the way they managed to drag themselves back. But can you account for the defence for France? For most of the game, it was fairly passive, wasn't it? I'd expected it to be far more intense to the rush defence, and it was, it wasn't that it wasn't solid, but it wasn't the defensive plan I thought was going to be carried out.
It's an interesting rhetoric, isn't it? Because you've got clearly Sean Edwards' foundations of previous with the Welsh, and now him being so influential with the French. And you say about the French ability to impact the Welsh attack. It did. Like, they had far more slower ball than they've had all tournament. So from that point of view, it did work. But I agree. I think they were much more cautious as they had been previously. And as a result of that, gave Wales a little bit more time with possession, but they just didn't quite capitalise. And when they stopped playing, was their downfall. That last 10 minutes, it almost felt as though they needed to keep that tempo higher. And so often teams try and not lose a game rather than continue to win.
And the problem is, if you start running down the clock, I mean, time wasting is, and the great thing, about Luke Pearce was, on the field, he was hurrying play up. When it came to the off the field dissection of important decisions, he was calming people down. I thought, we'll come on to the refereeing in a minute, but if you indulge in sort of managing the clock, if you go behind, you've contributed to running your response time down. So I never think, apart, if it's the last 2 minutes and you want to zigzag and try and get the ball off, maybe, But 12 minutes out is too long to take that attitude.
It is, and it goes along with the fact that the Welsh just needed to win the game, didn't matter how, and the French putting that pressure on themselves, saying, "Look, we're not just going to win it; we need the bonus point."
Yeah,
that was always going to mean that they wanted that higher tempo. So I get why Wales did that and tried to slow it down throughout the game, but ultimately it came down to those last few really crucial moments where you're thinking for all money, just play a little bit wider. You've done it all tournament, play that little bit further out with your big men carrying wide, and they didn't. They went to a pick and go, very passive tactic, and actually they probably 3 or 4 phases before they got penalised were sealing off. So absolutely justified in that decision.
I mean, look, there were loads of decisions. I can't remember a game, not readily, where so many big decisions, were discussed, all of which could have had and did have an influence, but the majority of which, as a neutral, I would say they got right. And if you can't be 100% about that, you're taking the umpire's call bit, like cricket. I couldn't see one where you could say unquestionably there was no grounds for doing that.
That's an interesting point, actually, because I've been watching quite a lot of the Southern Hemisphere rugby, and one of the things I do hope happens in the game, and this is actually weirdly in the World Tens we did in Bermuda, was a captain's challenge, because there was one point where Fico went to the referee, who couldn't speak very good English, who was trying to say, "I scored the ball, I scored a try, I scored the try," in the corner, and then the footage then showed it. And for me, I felt sorry for the French, because with a different production element and a different language barrier.
Well, he was speaking French, though, wasn't he, Pierce? I mean,
a little bit, yeah. But in terms of the actual conversation Fico had with him, the ball was then shown to be over the line in the final stages of the game. So I think there's elements like that where a captain's challenge, as they do in New Zealand, it would make sense to have that for a scoring moment, definitely.
Let's tell you what. Why don't we get Sean Holley in here? Because he's there. The former Ospreys head coach. Let's get a Welsh angle from this. We're just 2 Englishmen talking about it. How do you feel, Sean?
Mixed emotions, Bri. I really enjoyed your comedy, by the way. Well done on the weekend. We got mixed emotions. Now, saw the cold light today on a Monday. The overriding thing, I think, from speaking to a lot of my friends is one of pride in the team. We were backs against the wall in the autumn, new coaching team, wondering a little bit about where we were going to go, but they've just grown through the tournament, and to get it to the 80th minute in a Grand Slam decider in Paris against probably the best side in the championship there's a sense of pride, but overwhelming sadness that for the likes of Alun Wyn-Jones that they didn't do it. But what a game, what an advert for the Six Nations.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they'll get the title. I can't see France getting a bonus point win and winning by 20 or more than 20 points against Scotland. I doubt it.
Well, it's a tough ask, but the thing is, and Rob might agree with me, I don't know, but now they know what they got to do in France. They could just do it, but I think Scotland got something to play for as well. They can score tries. They'll go out and give it a go. Could be a hell of a game there again on Friday. Yeah. It'd be brilliant.
Yeah. Look, the way that the campaign's gone, I'm glad that it removed any of, well, it was stupid before, but any of these accusations of luck and so on and so on. It's just it's a shame, another person got sent off against Wales, and I call this, and the way that I thought the way that the referee and the TMO handled it, and also the players, because these were huge moments throughout the game, weren't they? Every single one you could see, even at the time, think this could be the decision, and there were 8, 9, 10, and they kept going on. And I thought it was an advert for everything about rugby that's good, and certainly about the Six Nations.
Unbelievable. I've never seen so many held up over the line incidents. Unbelievable. And it's sort of added to the drama of it, isn't it? I thought Luke Pearce controlled the game really well. His demeanour, the manner in which he did it. I thought the players on both sides were very accepting, and had it been anybody other than Wayne Barnes, possibly Nigel Owens, but he wouldn't have done a Welsh game, then that composure in that box was needed, because they realised the magnitude of the game and each decision. They wanted to know what was to come. But yeah, I thought it added to it. It made for a long broadcast. I hope they paid you a bit more, Bray. But,
No.
but it was drama, and that's what we want. And we do get it in the Six Nations. And there's been a lot of talk about wrong decisions and this, that, and the other. And I just picked up the end of your conversation. I agree with Rob. I'd like to see a captain's challenge in. I think it would add even more jeopardy and interest. I'd like to see a 50-22 come in. That they're trialing down there now in Australia, and the goal line restart. I think all those things will add to it again. The rugby of late, the Six Nations brought it to life. I do a lot on the Pro 14. The rugby in the last couple of weeks where there's been a bit of jeopardy has been fantastic.
Yeah,
really has. Tries galore and real good stuff. So long may that continue.
I tell you, what difference does this make? We are now, my seasonal adjusted disorder is probably going away now because it started getting light. And look, I feel a lot better. You get up in the morning, it's not dark. What difference does it make playing at this time rather than, in the depths of January and so on, when, let's face it, even if the pitches are all good now, it can be freezing, it can be rainy, it can be windy. And as we all know, it is difficult to play good rugby. Not impossible, but it's a lot. The point to make is this, actually. It is a lot easier to play good rugby with good weather.
Well, I give you an example now. I'm off to commentate on the Scarlets Connaught tonight, and it's beautiful here today, right? It's beautiful. Down at Park of Scarlets, I'm hoping for a great game. There's something on it for the Scarlets. And another example, Bray, is the Dragons who play at Rodney Parade. You've played there, I've played there. It's not the most welcoming place to go. The pitch has been cut up as they play soccer. Newport County play soccer on it. So the Dragons have moved their last two games to the Principality Stadium. And the games have been brilliant. And the Dragons have been much better. So that tells you a lot. And now we've got the Rainbow Cup approaching us. Now that's going to go April, May into June. South African teams playing in warmer weather. I'm really looking forward to it. I think you're right. I think there's a move there.
Look, let's just return to this. I'll get this out of the way because it's in the script. Fabian Galtier saying deliberately trying to get players sent off. Well, frankly, they've been very good at it. And if you want to find out how they do it, because it certainly helps, doesn't it? What a stupid, nonsensical comment. I can't believe. Look, if there was, I hope there was something lost in translation, because Fabian's a good lad. That's a daft comment.
I think there's an element of hopefully getting a lighter sentence for his player. But yeah, I can't see the Welsh guys, lifting up a finger and poking it in our own eyes. That's one thing. I don't think they're looking for it. And if you look at the Peter O'Mahony one, it's a clear one into the face. You're going to react naturally. They're tough guys, that. But you don't want anybody around the face, neck, head with force, eyes in particular, private areas. Stay away from those. They're professional guys. They're tough guys. You know this. There's no way they're feigning and looking for it. In fact, I thought one French player did act a little bit football style, dare I say, yes, for one infringement.
Yes, he did. Yes, so Fiku.
Let's
Fiku,
not
it was.
Throw stones.
Yeah.
Let's not throw stones here,
Rob, I think you've got something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, absolutely right on what you're saying there, Sean. One thing I'd like to just touch on from your coaching perspective is when, teams transition and get a new coach in, there was a lot of heat on PVAC. Autumn Nations wasn't the most spectacular for Wales, but how much more credibility does he now have in the bank?
Huge, Rob. It's a real good question. I think another one, a guy I work with a lot, is Jonathan Humphreys, the forwards coach. There was all sorts of problems in the line-out and the scrum. They've been one of the best set-piece sides towards the end of the Six Nations, so huge credit to him. And I think the attacking shape and intent that we've shown now under Stephen Jones and Wayne Pivac's sort of philosophy when they won the title with the Scarlets has started to shine through. When we conceded against France early on, the boys dusted themselves down, didn't faze them. They came at them, they stuck to their shape. They looked really dangerous. And you thought to yourself, crikey, we could do this because the favourites were France. But I think it's added a lot of credibility. There's still a slight question mark, Rob, for me, over the replacement strategy. At the red card on 67 minutes, Wayne took off Bigger, Jonathan Davis, Thomas Francis and Ken Owens at once. And from there, it went downhill. With an extra man. We had 2 yellow cards. We gave silly penalties away in front of the kickers. We didn't have enough leaders on there. And I think they look back, reflect on that and go, that's something we have to address because it's worked in the Six Nations. I've been Scotland bringing Sheedy and Hardy on. But in this one, it backfired.
See, the problem you have there is, yes, you get the energy, but they can't get the exact nature of the game. You can see what referees giving or not giving, but when you're on the field, you feel it, don't you? And you and far too often. I mean, this was the same with England. Substitutes come on, desperate to be involved and make a contribution. Just do that thing. Just put that hand in there. Just carry away from support or whatever. So yeah, four is. But the difficult thing is, when it's worked before. If he hadn't done that, people say, well, you did that before. Why do you do it now? But the point about the managing the game is 12 minutes, 10 points, man up.
Don't tell me, like you, Bry, with 12 minutes to go, just had a red card, you're 10 points up in a Grand Slam decided, you're Ken wins.
I'm not tired. I'm not tired.
There's no way you're not going to last. You're not going to last that last 12 minutes. The same as Dan Bigger. These are fit boys. I mean, I think that was I don't know whether it was a premeditated call, but it certainly backfired because it went downhill from there. I'm not saying it's the reason, but a contributing factor.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, the one talismanic leader amongst the ranks of the whole Six Nations is Alun Jones. I mean, just incredible. He's actually my age, which is pretty sad to say because he's a good. Is he a shoo-in for you, Sean, you think, for the Lions?
He's your age. Imagine how that makes me feel. I coached him for the do you know what? At the start, I was willing him on to be selected on the tour with a chance, Rob, of playing in the test. But as the season's gone on in the Six Nations, you have to look at the whole picture and say, why not? Who else, I think, is the question. Who else in this form and fitness and mentality and leadership? It has to be Alun Wyn. In the big moments, in the way he's conducted himself with referees, the way he's performed. He was a top tackler again. I think he's a second top tackler in the whole Six Nations. It's not bad for a guy his age. You're sat here doing a podcast. He's out on the field trying to win Grand Slams. He's in the second row. So yes. All jokes aside, and for that reason, I want the Lions tour to go ahead. No other reason. I don't, because he won't make next year if it's pushed back, will he? But the fact that people outside of Wales are talking about it now, well, that says it all.
Yeah. Sean, thank you very much again. I'm looking forward to Friday. I'm pretty sure you'll be celebrating, not quite in the way you wanted, but certainly if you'd have taken that, as they say, if you'd have offered that before the game, you'd have taken it, wouldn't you? There we go. Yeah. Cheers. Thanks very much, Sean.
Cheers, boys. All the best.
Rob, Ireland 32, England 18. They always talk about learning lessons from games, don't they? Now, I'm not quite sure what you learn from this other than, apart from one race performance against France, this squad of players, which includes perennial favourites all around, are simply not being good enough. There are reasons partly to do with form, the reasons I think also structurally. The comment was made to me the other day, it appears to be easier to get in this squad than out of it. Now, Jones said that he said after the World Cup that the things were going to change. He said it's in process of amendment. I haven't seen any amendments. Unlike Wales, who can at least look at their replacements, Ireland to a certain extent, Scotland to a certain extent, certainly France, we don't know about Simmons or Dombrandt or another Simmons or Smith or Umaga or a host of people. And that to me is the main thing. If we were going to go down in the Six Nations and not perform very well, I might have been a little in a better mood, slightly, had we at least blooded these players and found something about them. As it is, I don't think you can take anything really out of this. I like Eddie Jones. I don't think he should go. We can't afford him to go on all his team. I believe it's right to give people the whole of their tenure, wherever you contract them to, and then judge them, because a similar thing happened in 2018, which we know what happened, a couple of years later. But I just do not see a positive for this campaign. I just don't see one.
I think one thing we have to be really cautious of from the outset is to look at the fact that it was so unique in terms of the protocols in place. So, okay, we can obviously talk about the impact that an empty Twickenham will have, but also the fact that it was a curtailed squad, that they weren't able to have as much flex as perhaps they would usually. So 28 named players, in which they weren't then able to bring in many more. So I think that does explain a little bit about bringing certain players in, but I absolutely agree. The last time we saw failure at this level, it ousted Robshaw, Kerr, Haskell and Brown. They got cut.
Yeah.
So I'd be very interested to see what's going to happen now as a result of this, because ultimately what it comes down to is these players have lost that confidence and they've lost that ability to show what they are capable of. And it's also backed up by the stats.
I mean, add to in your caveat, I would add this. The peculiar problem with the Saracens players, which I have highlighted, they didn't get any game time because the Championship wasn't on. That meant even if they'd been not picked to get game time with the clubs, they couldn't have played before Wales because they didn't have any fixtures. If they've going to come in after Wales, they've had one fixture against the Cornish Pirates, and he would have said, well, but on the other hand, people say, if you leave out 5 players and 360 caps, what on earth are you doing? You're spine of your team. So, yes, I understand that. But what I don't understand is the minute nature of tinkering and so on. I mean, I know he wanted to play Miller's on, and I actually was looking forward to seeing Daly at 13. But it all comes back to this, the flexibility. If you're going to say, right, we need tried and tested, we don't need tried and tested, we need amendments, you've got to signal that, because at the moment, you've got players who are not playing well, and to me, they unless they get a short, sharp shock somewhere, I'm not sure how it's going to be shaken up.
Yeah, I'd be slightly more cautious if I was the support staff, to be honest, of the players, because like you said, there's a degree of protection for them. But if you're wanting to make a statement, so often you see it, the head of the team, the director of rugby, whatever, they throw the lieutenants under the bus pretty quick. So I think I'd be pretty shaky times if I were anyone in the periphery of this spearhead, that's for sure.
Yeah. Look, if we are talking just about players, well, let's talk about the coaching setup. John Mitchell defence has done, a job for a long, reasonable amount of time, considering a national coach. Defensively, I've been disappointed the way they've been unpicked from set pieces actually in this tournament several times.
Yeah, and the fact that so many breakdowns have been penalised as well. That's something that we can't avoid talking about. That's the discipline issue, isn't it? But that's part of your defensive mindset. That's nothing to do with your attack.
Yeah.
So I think there's a massive question to be asked there, certainly.
Attack-wise, I'm never quite sure who's in charge of attack at the moment.
Well, it is Simon Amor on paper,
yes,
and that's the thing. And I know Simon.
Of course,
I've played with
Simon
him,
really well.
and he's coached me for years. But I think the one thing that I'm seeing is he hasn't got that freedom. If you look at any one of the sevens teams that he's produced, the one thing they have is an incredible skill set, and they are willing to play. Now, looking at it statistically, the one game we can highlight has been a reasonable success for the English was against the French, whereby they had far more possession. They had 8 offloads, which actually was a crude total of their other 3 games, believe it or not, and 7 line breaks. This weekend, 3 line breaks, 4 offloads. I mean, how can you get players the skill set of the likes of Billy Vunipola, who is the only one to feature in the top 10 for offloads with 4? They win collisions. Of course they're going to. They do it every single time they carry the ball. But the mindset is different to not think about continuing play. And that's why I fear for playing the likes of South Africa or New Zealand, because if you watch any one of their teams play, offload's almost a prerequisite. If you can get your arms free, it's getting thrown out. I mean, 4 offloads for the whole game's dire.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've shown. I mean, the first French try last week showed this. They didn't play particularly well. 4 offloads, bang in the corner, and we've got to explain to people who maybe not quite understand this. Not trying to be patronising, but defences are so good now. You can shore up big carriers. What you can't do is if a man passes out of the tackle, the term is offload used and whatever, he's immediately beyond the gain line. And you are scrambling to try and get him down. If you get him down again and he does another one, your defensive line has possibly gone 10 metres, 20 metres back. And even if you're sprinting back, you've got to go round the corner to get back on side. And these are almost impossible to stop, when they get going. So that's why they are so valuable. The offloading stats are so important because they mean you get clean breaks, and clean breaks should mean, if they're finished off properly, should mean points. So, that's the point. Is there any more to say about England until something happens? I'm not sure there is. Just not good enough. Really,
back up your argument a bit more. They're 5th for offloads in the Championship. They're also 5th for the amount of carries. They're 4th for broken tackles, and they're 4th for the most knock-ons. Yeah,
skill set's not good enough. I mean, and one's reflective of the other. You don't get on the front foot. You make more mistakes, etc. Penalties. Now, see, the penalties is a big issue because that's not just about being under pressure. It's also about how and when and where you give them. Whether you give 4 in succession, as they've done in several games. How you don't. You know, if you give 4 penalties in succession, you are gonna end up conceding points, or if not, losing opportunities to score points and being back in your own half. And that's what we've seen with England. You know, not enough red zone entries. Too few occasions have they stayed there for more than, you know, a couple of phases or your set pieces. And the concession of penalties in succession has been absolutely killing them.
67 penalties across the whole championship, equal with Italy. And the magnitude of this is every single time you give away a penalty, bearing in mind how hard you work to get the ball, you've given it away.
Yes.
67 times. That is mind-blowing.
Rob, you add to that the number of kicks. Because people don't understand this. If you kick the ball, you're right, you might end up further down the field defending, but you haven't got the ball anymore unless you catch it again. I know that sounds stupidly simple, but that is a turnover. It's a turnover as much as anything else.
Yeah, I think Eddie sees it as a way of gaining territory, then competing for possession. Actually, I got to defend them here, that they are the same as they were in the French game, but they actually kicked away less than 10% of their possessions.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like that because what's happening is there's not enough time to gain that momentum. Whereas you watch Ireland play, it was 2 carries, front football, then they played and accrued up to 20 phases. Yeah. You just don't see that from England at the moment. So you've got to wonder why. Yeah.
Well.
That is why I'm riled you up here. Sorry, Brian.
No, not one way. I'm just to tell you, as an England fan, and I am a fan as much as anyone else. When I work, I've taught myself to be as unbiased as I can be, but it's just I can't see a pathway at the moment. I want to see a pathway. I want to see where we're going. You know, I might, even if I didn't agree with the pathway, if I can see one, it's better than not knowing one. You know, the Lions, let's hope will tour this summer, or certainly play at home. Where does Jones? What sort of time of the calendar year is he going to have to make his statements about new players and refreshment and amendments and so on? Is it this summer? Is it next Six Nations or?
Yeah, essentially, you've got to look at when the EPS is announced, so the elite player squad that has to have a certain amount of forewarning for the clubs to realise who they're going to be losing, what the compensation will be, and that's that's the reason why many people state it, that it's easier to, it's harder to get out the team than it is to get in the team because of that protective nature of these financial agreements in place. So once you've got that announcement, which I think are usually around September, it's not actually a massive window if you think about it, really, because these players are going to come on the back of a Lions tour and then straight into a Premiership campaign. So it used to traditionally be, if you had an absolutely worldly start to a Premiership campaign, after 4 or 5 games, your name could be in consideration for a squad. But it certainly seems at the moment that that's just gone. There is no degree of form because they look for such stability.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's briefly touch on Scotland. Latest side to thrash Italy. Campaign ended on a high. Might end on an even bigger high in Paris. Look, expectations from England very high, then went down a bit. Typical Scotland, really. I'm not being dismissive. You know, they are up and down, still searching for that absolute grail, which is consistency. Their prospects in Paris.
Well, it made it a lot easier by the fact that PRL have now announced that they can release their senior players from the Premiership. So I think that's going to make a massive difference. I think they've got this edge about them, Scotland, that when they actually really get themselves up for it and want to almost prove everyone wrong, they can be quite a force. It's more so the games where we expect them to have a little bit more of a level playing field. They really seem to struggle, typically against Ireland.
Yes.
So I see that a lot. I think they're growing. I think they've got a lot of senior leaders with opinion, and they're integrating brilliantly well with their coach, Gregor Townsend. So that really bodes well. And actually, they've got a dearth of these younger players coming through that I'm really excited about. So I think, in terms of their overall campaign, they'll be happy.
I certainly think they want to, with from football, their backs are, particularly dangerous.
They are dangerous. And you've got to go down the fact that you compare them to in England, they haven't got anywhere near that depth. So, when you look at it from that point of view, you've got these young, impressionable backs who need game time, who need to play at this level, and their ability to stay together as a unit is what's going to set them apart from the longer term.
Yeah. Well, the women's game had a significant announcement, important and I think good announcement from World Rugby. They announced a new annual tournament. It's taking place from 2023 onwards. It consists of 16 international teams across 3 tiers. It's been labelled as something that will supercharge the women's game. Yes, marketing phrase there. And it has been allocated £6.5 million by World Rugby. In the face of a pandemic, not a bad commitment, somewhere to start. Let's hope it proves to be the fillip that the women's game globally needs. At least they can say they managed to get a global calendar together, which is more than the men have been able to say. Even COVID has not been able to bang those heads together. Why don't we speak to someone who will have a much more informed viewpoint than I? Katy Daly-McLean, the former England captain, is joining with us. Hello, Katy.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
I'm all right. What do you think of the announcement?
In terms of, obviously, the postponement of
No. Let's World Rugby, the announcement. 16-team tournament, 3 tiers from 23 onwards. What do you think?
I think it's brilliant. I think, it's going to make life a lot easier having one global calendar and everybody aligned. I think previously, all probably the unions with the most money were the ones that played the most games. And I think it's exactly right. What we want from World Rugby is to invest in the game as a whole and developing the standards. So actually, when you come to World Cup years, everybody's on a level playing field, or as much as they can be.
How do you think they're going to deal with the disparity still in funding? I mean, it's much better that they've got everyone, eating off the, reading off the same script. But when the funding is still going to be disparate, I suppose it's chicken and egg. How do they go about trying to even that up?
Yeah, I think this is probably the way that they think is best, to be honest. It's like you say, there is still a disparity. But I think hopefully by allowing unions to be playing regularly, it encourages unions to invest in their women's programme. I think previously unions have got away with not doing that because the girls just weren't playing or they weren't playing enough. But now these competitions, the standards of the competition, hopefully will continue to go on and on. That's going to encourage unions actually that the investment in the women's game is serious, the support and the commercial support from that start to increase as well, and actually makes it easier for unions to invest as well.
Well, talk about investment, Katy. It's Rob here. How are you going? The Women's Super League, massive news in football that they have now got a situation where 22 of their games are going to be the BBC, 44 with Sky. Huge investment. Do you ever look across and think that's going to be us soon?
I really hope so. I think, it is the things that women's football have gone on to do, and probably they are, 7 to 10 years ahead of rugby. It's fantastic. Like you see, the amount of coverage that the game's going to be getting, not just only on Sky, but on free-to-air TV as well, is phenomenal. And I think for aspirations as a rugby player, as a female rugby player, that's where we hope our game's going to go, and hopefully sooner.
Katy, the Six Nations gets underway next month. It's not being done as a part of the umbrella of the men's Six Nations. I've discussed this before. I've made my views clear. Let's have your views on that. Would you like to see? Tell you what do you think of the change? And would you like to see it being permanent?
I think for me, I think I'm born. I think I've grown up and played in the Six Nations where it was like an England-Scotland weekend or an England-France weekend where the women have played, the men's played, and the 20s have played, and you're kind of in that umbrella. I think for the women's game as a standalone, it's a real opportunity to kind of go and drive our own message, start to kind of maybe convert your average rugby fan who just enjoys the game, and maybe actually just spend their Six Nations weekends choosing between what they want to watch. So you hope that actually some of the people who just enjoy the game will transfer over to rugby. And I think for me, it's a great opportunity to see what the appetite really is for women's rugby when it's on its own, it's accessible, it's easy to go and kind of watched, hopefully. Yeah, well,
let's hope we've all got the right expectations of it, because what I would hate is it to not deliver and then set the prejudiced people back. I mean, I've made my view so clear on the future of rugby in general, being underpinned by women's and girls rugby, that I'm not going to repeat that again. Let's just hope that the shop window, when it comes around, works as you said it might do. I haven't thought about that because, you're right. A lot of unions will be able to say, oh, it's a women's team, so what, they've played so-and-so and lost. Once they start being on global calendars and it's all round and everyone knows, then I think the embarrassment factor maybe hopefully comes in and says, listen, we need to, however it's done, let's get some money into this.
Yeah, and that's exactly the hope, isn't it? You're now being accountable. It's now not acceptable just to go, oh, well, they can play 2 games in the build-up to a World Cup in 3 years' time. Actually, they're going to be playing regularly in these two windows where you're saying, actually, I want my girls to go and have an opportunity to really go and put on a show.
Yeah. Well, everything's up in the air. Let's hope it can mirror the drama of the men's Six Nations. I'm sure we both agree that if England perform as the England men did, there will be very, very big questions to be asked. But I don't think they will. I don't think they will. Katy, it's great to speak to you again. Thanks very much.
And you, thanks, guys.
Rob, CVC. We didn't get a chance to discuss this last week, but the some say vulture capitalists secured a 5-year, £365 million deal with Six Nations. They got a 7th share of the company, which means they're not minority shareholder protected. So the other people could actually, frankly, say, we don't care. Thanks for your money. Now we'll do exactly what we want. They're not going to do that. I know they're not going to do that because they're quite scared of CVC. It's widely assumed the move will see the competition move behind a paywall. Now, there's several parts to this. What is your initial response to CVC investing and being given a share?
First thought, absolute bargain. They've paid $365 million over 5 years for the entity of the Six Nations value of you could say a 7th, so 14.3%. The BBC and the ITV, their combined broadcasting was 90 million annually. So you think about how much money that they're going to make on the back of this deal. What brilliant business from CVC. And they've been clearly playing up to this with their kind of minority shares in both the Prem and the Pro 14 and a bit of interest into Sanzar. So I think for their part, well played. Someone's going to benefit from this in their pension fund.
Yes. Funny enough, a friend of mine who started the women's series, motor series up, said to me, why would you give any of your equity away to a capital company whose interests are almost diametrically opposed to yours? And if not so, you should at least know what you're getting. If you want their expertise, she said to me, why don't you book them as consultants?
Well, yeah, speak to the government about that. I mean, it's quite lucrative. They're going to pay. So RFU, I've got my maths right here. They're going to pay the RFU £19 million over 5 years, and then are still able to claim a 7th of all of the commercial interest. Bearing in mind, and you know it firsthand, what it's like hospitality-wise at a jam-packed 82,000. And what's happened is Six Nations have been on their knees quite clearly. The unions have been lobbying, and this couldn't have been better timing for an investment company. Why they've done it, I don't know. It's exciting on one part because you don't know where it's going to go. But at the same hand, you're thinking that's a significant slice to lose.
Well, let's look at the broadcast rights themselves, because venture capitalists, and CVC in particular, they can only make money one of two ways. They either create new competitions, that's new rights, so that they can exploit those, or they ratchet up the existing rights and find a way to make money out of them. Now, bundling together the Autumn Internationals and the Six Nations is almost certainly going to happen. That almost certainly precludes ITV and BBC from being able to bid for it. The BBC, because although it is the property, sporting property, which absolutely fits their regional remit. For the three countries in Northern Ireland, there isn't a better one. You cannot get a better one. In terms of value for money, it's huge. But I do know. I mean, I know Tim Davey fairly well, and I remember mentioning this to him, and his response was so lukewarm. And this was before he was made head DG. I thought, that doesn't sound good to me. So I'm pretty sure the BBC are not going to push the boat out. ITV can only do so much. We all know what happened to cricket between 2005 and 2015. 10 years later, the ECB announced record profits, they announced record investment in the game, and a 30% drop in participation. Now, that must have been down to something. I'm willing to suggest some of it, at least, was down to if you can't see it, you can't do it. I'm not defending my position with the BBC. That's how it goes. You're far more likely to get a contract because you're younger, more handsome, and more technically adroit than I am these days, Rob. But what about the pay-per-view angle, participation, and the whole mix?
It's really interesting when, as you say, it's almost like a podcast in itself, Brian. It's interesting to get your thoughts in particular, having been, doing what you've done so well for so long. I think the one thing that does quite change things a little bit is this current model we've got around the subscriptions, and certainly something like an Amazon or a Netflix, whereby that wouldn't necessarily be in complete competition with the BBC. It could almost be alongside it. So something like the BBC Wales, the BBC Scotland, and the BBC itself, to be able to put these as different satellite programs, almost like your match of the day. They don't own the rights because Sky and BT have them, but still there feels there's a real presence on the BBC for the free-to-air footage. Would that get the same traction? Of course it wouldn't. 7.5 million people watched on Saturday night watching Wales take on France. So we're not going to get those numbers. But at the same time,
you'll get about a seventh. That's a drop off. It's about the highlights programs at the BBC. The BBC highlight program for the New Zealand England game, which is the biggest game of the autumns, a couple of years ago, 1.1 million. Sky got 1.2 million. So, but that's quite good. But that you take that against Six Nations, and it's a seventh, and so on. What is your view? Because some people have been saying to me, young people do not consume media in this way, and I know they don't, because they don't watch television unless you force them to or whatever. But they are watching different platforms. That to me is a slightly different thing though, because you've got to cater for both, for the fan, the casual fan, of which out of 7 million, 6 are casual fans. So does that matter?
I also get a bit concerned because I cite these numbers, and when you think about it, traditionally, I can't think of many people that watch a Six Nations in my kind of world that weren't in a rugby club watching it, where they're not even counted as part of that statistic.
Yes.
So from the actual point of view of it being a paywall, name me a pub that doesn't have Sky or BT or an Amazon accessibility. So I think
there are a few that don't have BT. There are a few that don't have BT, and there are a few that don't have. I mean, the point is you can find one if you want to.
Yeah, and that's the point, isn't it? That if we're talking about this as a paywall, it depends where you're actually having that interaction. Because if it's at home, albeit we're all at home at the moment, so the majority of those millions were accountable. They're actually a bit skewed if you think about the amount of presence in a rugby club per se. I remember I was once at Centre Parks and everyone was watching the Six Nations.
But these are adjusted for. They're adjusted for. People say, well, how many people watch Sky in a pub as against in their homes? Well, people watch the BBC in a pub as well. It's just what's on, so they do factor that in. I just, for me, the consciousness element, and the thing for the women, the women in sport has been, if you can't see it, you don't want to be it. You can't be it. I just cannot believe that the effect it had on cricket will be unique, and we really do not want drops in numbers. We really, rugby is a minority sport. The numbers are falling with males slightly, and females are making this up. This is not where we need to be, and I'd be. You see, a lot of this goes for whether or not you like it. So much money now goes through the unions to the professional clubs. It's starting the balance is starting to tilt from the amount of money you get from everything. The professional game, although you could say it should run itself like the Premier League do, that's not the way it works in rugby. They take taking a bigger slice, and what we can't afford in rugby is that balance to tilt away from grassroots, which is where the whole game, is developed to start with, because the pro clubs don't make their own players.
I'd also probably suggest that only the real major sporting events do then get those conversations the week after going, I'm going to go and play because I've just seen this. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say, there's some 400,000 registered rugby players in the UK, yet we're getting 7.2 million viewers of the rugby. There isn't always that correlation there. No. I think what you've got to do is put it into the foundations of schools. I think schools is massive.
Schools is the most important.
Then you start talking about safety. So that, again, these conversations are many, many, and far between. But I think, from the broadcasting point of view, I think there is a balance to be had of free-to-air and getting the money of the lucrative broadcasting.
Well, I think most rugby fans agree. Certainly, most Six Nations fans agree. But we will see about that. The problem for rugby taking a mature, medium, long-term decision is it's being taken in the most atypical of circumstances, where the unions are desperately short of cash. And when you're saying CVC played a blinder, don't think they didn't understand. Beginning of this a year ago, when they were mooted to make their investment, don't think they wouldn't have said, hold on, let's just see where this goes. Don't need to do it yet. Let's see where they are in a year. See how poor they are then. Because they're good at their job. That's what they do. But just remember, everybody, they are there for cash. Cash only. They've got shareholders, and that is it.
And only a 6 or 7% increase is said to be a really good return for them. So, I mean, I think these are brilliant in terms of business.
Yeah. Okay, now then, before we get to fan questions, Lions selections. Look, I've said it's very difficult, form, etc., etc. Why don't we just try and do this? Well, let's try and get 5 between us, or 5 each, or whatever, and a captain. Now, if Alun Wyn-Jones is still playing and playing well, I think you're going to have a lot of trouble not picking him and picking him as captain.
I would absolutely concur with that. And hearing Sean Holley talk about it almost re-emphasises my kind of understanding of his ability to galvanise players and teams. Yeah. Is the experienced head. Everyone knows that this is kind of like his swan song, so you're even more inclined to listen to that as well.
And funnily enough, to try harder. When I left Nottingham, we had a final game against Gloucester. They brought the trophy up because Gloucester were in the league. Everyone played like men possessed, and I remember Teague said to me afterwards, "You could have just bloody given it to us." And I said, "Well, it's my last game," and that was a tremendous.
He's gone. He's finally gone.
Yeah. If you really, but that sort of thing can come into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ask CJ Stander. I'm pretty sure he'll attest to that being a significant reason.
Yeah, good point.
The way he plays a game. So
in the second, all right. In the second row, I think Itoje is a certainty. Because I think, not least because Gatland's seen what he did in the last tour, and provided he plays this side of the line, I can't think of I don't think there's anyone to touch him as a partner to Jones. One of the few, if possibly the only, real success of the Six Nations, apart from his penalties.
Yeah, I mean, the way he talks, the way he holds himself, his ability to get right under the skin of these other teams, and it's South Africa. Don't forget, you need someone who can tackle. He's pretty good at that.
Okay, what about Dan Biggar's case for being selected? It's gone up and up in my estimation.
Yeah, I'm a fan of what Owen Farrell can bring to a team, certainly against someone like South Africa, because of his physicality.
You do realise people will be howling when they hear this. They'll be booing you and trying to stick pins in your voodoo doll.
Yeah, well, I don't have young to be honest, but I've gone for one per row, and my guy that's going to cement the team and solidify them would be Farrell at 10, because I think that's what you need against the South Africa.
Who do you play inside in them?
That is the big question. The reason why I've only picked 5 people is because if you get those 5 set, you can then change the team around it. I at the moment, think you'd have Henshaw somewhere near him, outside of him.
Yep.
Inside, good question. I mean, I'll tell you, I'll throw an absolute bolter in there. Get Danny Kerr back in the mix. He's absolutely carving it at the moment.
Will Stuart Hogg be the 15 in front of William Williams?
I don't know about that.
Interesting, isn't it? I mean, George Northwood, I think, will go. Whether it'll be a test player, he will definitely go. Jonathan Davis, I think, has made a good case to go. Very solid player.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think he's solid as well. You don't need to be, anything other than solid against the South Africans. It's more that defensive absolute prerequisite, and then a little bit on top of it.
Will Johnny May go? Faletau will go. Will Johnny May go?
I don't know about wingers, because I like Van der Merwe.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like he's an absolute wrecking machine, and give him a bit of edge against the fellow South Africans.
Yes,
I'd like to see how he's going to go there, because as a specimen, he's not someone that we generally produce in the UK, is he, genetically? No. So I'd be happy for him to have a go.
The back row
questions around Manu, I guess. If Manu's fit, that's a big ask to leave him out.
Yes, it is, but he's going to have to, he's going to have to get on time.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, let's have a look. Back row, Curry. Look, these are not starters, definitely, but I think Curry will go. Tipperick deserves to go, certainly. Faletau will be there.
Better footballer than Justin Tipperick.
Oh, what about that? What about that little grubber kick on the run, going sideways? Oh, just perfectly weighted.
I mean, my inside track on Tipperick, knowing him how good he is as a footballer, he was one of the few people that was shortlisted to go to Rio for the Sevens. He's that good.
Yeah.
He got a concussion, which kept him out for a significant amount of time, but he put his hand up for that, and I think he'd have been amazing at it, because he is what you call a complete footballer, isn't he? He's one of these people that can
line-out option as well.
Yeah.
Hookers. Well, I mean, look, leaving to me though. Jamie George, he played all the tests last time. He's had a torrid time. Luke Cowan-Dickey, probably rightly on form, was coming in front of him. It's just part of the difficulty with selecting this, and we'll get off it fairly soon, is Gatland will give credit for players he's worked with, both for Wales and the previous Lions tour, provided they're still fit, provided they're still on form. So we don't know where he puts players like JB George, who he's seen before. He might just say, well, look, Jamie, if you've recovered some form by the end of the season, I know what you can do. That's fine. And a lot of people say he didn't do anything in the Six Nations. He wasn't even picked on the first team. Well, this is why it occurs. This is why it's difficult. Well, Rob, we must run to some questions now. Funnily enough, some of them say things like this: should Eddie Jones be sacked?
Was that a question? I was waiting for a bit more to
that. No.
I don't think he should be sacked. I think Eddie Jones is wise enough to know that they're not going to sack him, and probably some significant financial reasons, as well as the fact that you don't generally do that. This knee-jerk reaction. I mean, there's going to be some pretty awkward conversations with his hierarchy, but I don't see how you could just sack someone like Eddie Jones without a significant plan in place. And
that's the point. That's the point. It's all right saying sack him. Who is available and wants the job 2 years out?
I'll tell you one interesting story from last month was Stuart Lancaster re-signing at Leinster, because I always thought, and obviously know him pretty well, that was a possibility that he could come back in the mix with the RFU. With a few caveats, I imagine, as to who was still there. But I don't think that's now an option. Everyone's talking Razor Robertson. Like, why would you leave Canterbury? They're absolutely amazing. In a time where he's grooming himself to be the next All Blacks coach, Ian Foster can't be around for too long, just from an age perspective. So I think, there's a really difficult question there as to who does replace Eddie Jones. And no Premiership coach would touch it at the moment. It's just brutal.
A question from Hugh. There was only one turnover recorded in the France-Wales game. Is that right? One turnover? Not. It can't be right, can it? One turnover?
I meant to be the stats man. I didn't see that.
Well,
it depends what you call a turnover.
Yeah,
some people see possessional steals as not turnovers, do they? That's the stats mind.
Fair enough. From Jonathan, football fans dislike VAR generally and argue it's a negative impact on the game. Rugby fans are a lot more positive about the table. Why is this the case? Is it just the nature of the two sports are very different? No, it's not, Jonathan. It's this. Is that football hasn't used VAR properly. If it used it in a similar way to rugby and cricket, and you had the clear exceptions, etc., as we have seen, it would be a lot easier. And this is the real point. You have to show the footage to the fans. They don't show it because they don't trust them not to riot. But I tell you what, that length of time, which when you're seeing nothing, waiting for the radio and seeing nothing happen, is boring and you get frustrated. At rugby, when you're watching it again and again, you get the discussion points, people are animated, and at least if you're honest, if something happens that you thought didn't happen, you then, you're a bit quieter. Whereas, that's not available to football fans. If they put the footage there, if you had the referee making a decision or a call to the VAR, and then only then could it be overturned with clear, well, not unambiguous, but clear, obvious stuff. Then you would have the certainty. And even when rugby's got to this stage, and cricket has, look, if it's at this question, I don't agree with that, but I understand why the TMO didn't overturn it. Because if he said on-field decision to try, he's got to find enough reason not to give it. If he can't, that's the way it goes. And people have accepted that now. The reason they don't accept it in the VAR is that it's all over the place. And by the way, it won't get better until you have your new offside rule, which is a ludicrous rule to me.
A couple of things. So I was lucky enough to go to Anfield on December 2019 and saw that live. I mean, the whole goal, non-goal thing, what a bizarre entity. The reason why it works in rugby is because you have amazing referees and officials like Wayne Barnes and Luke Pearce who converse with such clarity. However, if there were a crowd in the Stade Francais at the weekend just gone, there would have been a riot, because that would have been 8 minutes of not knowing what the hell was going on. So the one fix for that is let the crowd hear the audio. That has to happen. That's one button on a broadcast.
Yeah, hear the audio and see the
And that for me is
mind you in Paris it's all been English. So mind you, both of them can speak French, can't they? So I mean at
least they're hearing it. At least that's the thing, isn't it? That you get in that conversation and know what they're saying.
Yeah, and actually, Jonathan, this is the point. You have to have the VAR people and the referee talking to each other, and like in rugby league, where he says, "Right, you've asked me this, therefore I'm looking for this. This is the law or the rule. Therefore I see this. The law is that, and that's my, or that's what I'm telling you, or whatever." If you can hear the thought process and it's clear, they've considered the right things and whatever. Even if you don't agree, because not everyone won't agree. Some people are biased, some people never agree if it's against their team, but at least it's consistent. The problem is at the moment with VAR, you've no idea what they've said, what they've done, what angles they've seen. They just say, oh, that.
Yeah. And one thing I would add in, as well as the audio in stadium, captain's challenge. I think that then gives that degree of accountability.
Would you have one and you lose it if it's gone, or would you carry on if it's in cricket, if you get it right, you retain one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. Paul, are there too many penalties now being given? The Six Nations feels like a couple of phases after the game it stops for a penalty. Well, I've had this discussion with someone who said whistle happy referees. I said, listen, the referee, if he's good, and most of them are competent, at least, if not better, a lot of them, is dictated by what players do. If players go offside and they commit offences and keep dropping the ball or knocking it on, what is the ref supposed to do but blow his whistle? Most referees don't want to. And this stuff about he wants to be centre of attention, there might be a few of those. But more often than not, if you look at the game, the way it's being played and then the error rate is reflective of the amount of times you hear the whistle.
I think there's a couple of things here conversationally, which would be quite interesting to get your thoughts on. The spectrum of discretion in rugby is so vast. Like, yes. You can be accidentally offside and it'd be a penalty. You could punch someone in the face and it'd be a penalty. That, for me, is something we could look at in terms of making things short arm your free kick penalties. You're going to get a sped up game. You're going to get more time ball in play. You're going to get less of the thought process around it. Yeah. I think that would be a great thing to look at. What are we actually saying is worthy of a penalty as a significant 3-point advantage, and what could be just a quick right, get on with it. Yeah,
with the and this is always the thing with downgrading or upgrading things from one to the other. The law of unintended consequences. What if you downgrade something to a free kick, do you get a lot more of it? Well, you could say, well, if we get a lot more of it, they can be dealt with by successive things being turned into penalties and yellow cards. And by the way, even if you got a lot more of it, at least it'd be a lot more quick things, wouldn't it? Rather than, one slow thing. The stuff, the stats that came out about Owen Farrell, his kicks at goal, all of them, are taking longer than the mandatory time. That's not just him. But these things, when England needed it, Elliot Daly dropped goal. Bang. What did you do in sevens?
Do you know England's time in play against Ireland? You see what it was? 13 minutes.
Well, yeah.
Of possession. That is ludicrous. An 80-minute game. But Rugby League, I know we're big fans of it, but 78 minutes ball in play.
But what are you supposed to do with 13 minutes unless you manufacture? Well, yes, absolutely. Look, that's all we've got time for this week on Brian Moore's Full Contact. I tell you, the two or three bits there, as Rob said, they could have been podcasts on their own. Maybe we'll do them. A huge thank you to Rob Vickerman, as always. To Sean Holley and to Katy Daly-McLean for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe? Check out some of our previous episodes, or you can always get in touch at fullcontact@thetelegraph.co.uk. And if you need even more incentive, for the next couple of weeks you can enter a prize draw to win one of 3 £100 John Lewis gift vouchers. Just fill in our short survey. Look, it'll take no more than a couple of minutes. It'll ask you what you enjoy about the podcast, what you don't enjoy, what you'd like to hear more of, etc. You can answer anything apart from we don't want Brian Moore on it, obviously. Thank you for all your support throughout the Six Nations. We'll be taking a short break before the Lions series this summer. But until then, thank you, goodbye, good night, stay safe.